Hey economics students, so in this video we're going to look at this model, this pretty simple model but a very helpful model that allows us to understand economic activity. So it's called the circular flow model, sometimes it's called the 5-sector flow model because it has the households, businesses, governments, banks or financial institutions and the external or overseas sector. So it's going to help us to understand some key macroeconomic concepts like GDP, where demand for jobs or demand for labour comes from. Therefore, our material living standards, which we talked about in the other video, it shows us the flow of income between different sectors, how resources move around an economy, and really the actions of those 5 sectors that I just mentioned before. So let's go through this step by step. First of all, on the right here, we've got our businesses. Now, this is the business sector. So it's all businesses in Australia, the couple of million I think we have in Australia, maybe a million, don't quote me on that. And we've got our, 10 or 15 million households here on the left. So the first thing to think about is that households do own all the resources, or at least we assume that households ultimately own all the resources, all the factors of production in an economy. Now, there's some reading you can do on that if you want to delve a little bit deeper into why. Businesses over here, they buy resources from the household, they combine them to produce goods and services. All right, so let's go through it step by step. It doesn't matter where you start, but I'm going to start with consumption, right? So let's imagine households have some income. They go to Chadstone or Southland on the weekend and they spend some money. They buy goods and services from different businesses. We call this consumption. Remember, in macroeconomics, we don't look at the demand for one particular good. We look at all demand. So this is all demand from households, and we'll talk more about consumption later. In response to consumption, businesses obviously produce, and this happens simultaneously often, but businesses will produce goods and services, right? And that flow there is where we measure GDP, the amount of production that our business sector engages in. So in order to do this, in order to produce goods and services, if we take that Chadstone example for a second, well, if people are spending lots of money at Chadstone, all the businesses at Chadstone are going to need more staff, right? They're going to need more people to fill their shifts. They're busy, so they need some staff. So businesses will demand resources from the household sector, right? So they'll give people jobs. People don't work for free, so in return for jobs, for their labour, they'll get paid an income, okay? Now, this is the simplest model of economic activity. Production, income, and consumption or spending all equal the same thing in this model. However, this is too simplified. There are some other sectors that I mentioned before which are going to change the way that economic activity works. So the first thing is that we have the government sector. Governments spend money into businesses or into business sector, and they also tax the household sector. We have the financial sector, which is really just the banks in Australia. So I've got Westpac, Commonwealth, ANZ, but it's many more than that. And finally, we have the external sector. So we're talking about buying and selling stuff overseas. So let's imagine you're working at Chadstone and you get paid an income. You get your wage at the end of the week, but you don't get to keep all your wage, unfortunately. Some of that money has to be paid out of the household into the government sector in the form of taxes. So that's what we call, on this side here, we call leakages. So the first leakage will be you pay taxes to the government. The second thing you might do instead of spending all your money at Chadstone quite recklessly is you might save some of your money in a bank. Okay, that's also a leakage from that economic activity, the simple model that we looked at before. Finally, we do, and you may purchase things from overseas. A lot of technology in Australia, about 20 cents of every dollar in Australia is spent on things from overseas, right? Now, if you purchase something from overseas, that's income leaving Australia's circular flow model, okay? So what taxes, savings, and imports are all leakages in that they will decrease the level of economic activity. However, these 3 sectors also act to inject income back into the circular flow model or back into the Australian economy up here. Firstly, we know that the Australian government will spend money. So we built a new school at my school. The government spends that money. They hire a business. It was many millions of dollars. They hire a business to do that. That business produces goods and services. They need workers, so they demand labour from the household sector. And that labour, those people who have jobs, they might spend consumption elsewhere in the economy. And that increases the flow or increases economic activity. Secondly, banks will lend out your savings to businesses, and businesses may use that money to invest into new capital and equipment. They are basically purchasing from other businesses. That's also an injection that will also increase production and increase economic activity. Finally, Australia relies heavily on lots of exported goods and services to stimulate economic activity. So whenever we sell iron ore, coal, or whatever overseas, the income comes back into Australia from selling those goods to our mining businesses, and they will hire resources to work in those mines. They'll pay them an income, and those miners will spend money back into the economy. And again, the whole thing flows around and we have an increase in economic activity. So the idea here is that you need to understand that there are three things that would decrease economic activity: taxes, savings, and imports. And we need to think about what might impact those three things. And we have basically our aggregate demand formula here. Consumption, government spending, investment, and exports will all increase economic activity. All right, bye for now. I hope that helps you understand the circular flow model.